Dr. Pompa, good to see you, my friend.
Yeah, glad to be here.
I always look at my doctor and I think to myself, okay, is this guy really know what he's talking about? And if they look like you do, then I know that this is somebody worth listening to, because, so often you hear, I don't want the trainer at the gym that's out of shape, or the doctor that just doesn't look like he's healthy. And man, you look like you're thriving. So I'm in.
Yeah, well, that's good. I practice what I preach, and that is why at 58, I am healthy, thank God.
Yeah, well, you've had a hard time getting there. I mean, you've gone through some real struggles and difficulties with your own health, which led you essentially to what you're doing now. And maybe we'll start right there, just back into kind of what happened to you around the year 2000, I think, right around there, where you really went through some horrible, difficult things and led you to what you're doing today.
Yeah, this mission that I'm now on, I didn't choose it. It chose me, unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess. But unfortunate when I was going through the battle, because I didn't know it was wrong. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it started the end of 1999, progressed into 2000, 2001, 2, 3. Around 2003, I started finding some answers, but it started just with fatigue, like so many people get. I thought I was overtraining. I was doing a lot of cycling at the time. I was putting in about 250, 300 miles a week and running a very busy practice. I mean, I was seeing between 500 and 800 people a week by myself. So 2 young boys at the time, one of which you know. But so I thought I was just burning it, honestly. And so I took time off the bike and thought, that'll work. Took a whole week off. That's a lot, right? Came back, got on the bike, and I had just had nothing in the legs. And then I started getting weird headaches, and then I took more time off, and I was getting worse. So then I was like building anxiety, and it was like insomnia, couldn't sleep. Then I became allergic and intolerant to foods, never had that happen. I became sound sensitive. Then I became like very irritable. I mean, it goes on. I mean, I'm just scraping the surface, honestly. And sometimes when I read things that I wrote then, I'm like, oh my God, that's right. But anyway, so that took me to digging for answers. And everything I teach today literally came out of that period of my life. So from pain to purpose, has been my mantra.
Well, it's fascinating how that works. I mean, with my coaching program, I feel like I did the same thing. Like all the things I teach, it was because I was obsessed with trying to heal myself, trying to better my own self. And in that, I learned a lot of things, and I was able to sift through a lot of what did work and didn't work. And I'm sure you had a similar experience. Well, so you really started focusing on the cellular health of a human being. And I think that's such a deep subject, but I want to kind of get into that a little bit, because I think health gets misconstrued a lot of times. It's very difficult nowadays too. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of misinformation. The government itself puts out misinformation around health, and it makes it really difficult for the average person to even know how to be healthy or how to best take care of themselves. And so if you could just maybe kind of plug into that a little bit.
Look, when I was going through this, there was not that many of me, right? So it was a little harder. And by the way, I didn't have the power of the internet that it is today, right? I mean, literally, I'm not kidding when I say my wife and I would go to bookstores. Do we have those anymore? And I would literally sit down and read people's books. And we remember microfiche, going into like research. Like, I mean, I had to dig pretty darn deep, through the answers. Fortunately, I was dyslexic. I am still dyslexic, and which couldn't read till probably 6th or 7th grade, which that doesn't look well right on you. However, I did learn that I have this part of my brain that's able to remember everything that I learn and categorize it in my brain. So dyslexics have these brains that just work differently. That gave me an ability to acquire a lot of information around that time. One of the things that I had found is it all boiled down to what was going on in the cell, to answer your question. Certain genes were triggered. In the 80s, it was the Human Genome Project was just starting, where they were talking about genes getting turned on. Oh, you didn't just get a thyroid condition from your mom or dad or diabetes or whatever, autoimmune. We actually trigger those genes. So I started just digging into those areas. I started digging into the cell membrane, because I realized that it seemed like no matter what I take, it didn't matter. And I also realized that my thyroid wasn't working right, although my blood work was normal. And I remember finding like one paper on hormone resistance, meaning your cells don't hear your hormones. And I said, this is what's happening to me. right? It's like, because that's why my blood work is normal. And by the way, I spent $5,000 on blood work that I didn't have, hoping. I went to the head of toxicology at Allegheny General Hospital in Pittsburgh, ran all this stuff, and he looked at me and his exact words were, "You're healthier than me, son." I didn't want to hear those words, because if he'd have told me you have cancer, I'd have been like, good, let's fight
at least
it.
I know what I got.
Yeah, exactly. So anyways, blood work was normal, even though my hair was thinning. I had every thyroid symptom. I had every adrenal symptom, and I had, other symptoms, as I mentioned. But the bottom line is I learned from that one paper that my cells are not hearing my hormones. And that's why, even hormonally, like testosterone, everything. I mean, I became a shadow of myself, skinny, fat. I mean, everything bad that, could happen from an athlete to that, not good. No energy to make through a day. But when I started educating myself about that, and of course I learned about cellular inflammation is really the cause of why people are hormonally not right. And it led me to a lot of teaching. I still teach that message today. Most people today that don't feel well, that have brain fog, anxiety, can't make it through a day, can't sleep, their cells are resistant to hormones. And again, most people do what I do. They did. They go to their doctor, they run blood work, and it looks pretty darn normal. Now, eventually, the blood work can go off, and you go, oh, you have low estrogen or progesterone or testosterone, whatever it is. And then they give you the hormone. But the problem is if you don't fix the big problem that people are having, that their cells can't hear the hormones or get into the cell because inflammation's resisting that, you don't feel well, despite your blood levels becoming normal because of taking the hormone. So, what is driving cellular inflammation today? It's certain toxins that has just gone through the roof in the last 20 years.
Well, that was what I was going to ask you next, is what's causing this, and then after, let's start with that, I guess.
Well, okay. So, back into my story, because I was chasing this hormone issue that I knew I had and couldn't figure out, I also said, I think there's a problem with my pituitary hypothalamus. Okay, that sits in the center of the brain. That's what controls most of your hormones. It tells your thyroid, if it needs more hormone, produce more hormone. So the hypothalamus takes in information from your body and produce more or less of this hormone, that. And then it tells your pituitary, produce more. That's why my thyroid wasn't working right. The feedback mechanism wasn't right. The control tower, something was wrong. So I started trying to address the pituitary hypothalamus. I got worse. I actually created more anxiety. So I shelved that for a while. Fast forward, I was working with a very bright endocrinologist, and he said, "Dan, I think you have mercury poisoning." And I said, yeah, I thought so too. A year before, I did a mercury test. That was part of that $5,000 worth of blood work that I did. And he said, "What was it?" I said, "I did a blood test." He said, "That's the wrong test. That would be if you had acute, meaning you were getting poisoned almost daily. It would show up in the blood. Otherwise, it's not in the blood long. It would go into your tissues." Wrong test. So I did a different test, and he was right. I ended up having severe high mercury, which in fact was in my pituitary. That's where it go. I found a lot of studies showing, certain mercury, especially from silver fillings.
That's crazy that's how they used to do it, right? Yeah, right in your mouth.
They're 50% mercury. People have them in to this day. Trust me. Yeah. They're black, so they're probably not silver anymore because they're 30 some years old, but they contain 50% mercury. They vaporize mercury vapor across the blood-brain barrier, and it turns to something called inorganic mercury. And there it's locked for life unless you do something very specific to get rid of it. And that's part of what I'd been teaching. But so the mercury was there. He was right. And then, of course, I asked the question, "Where do you think I got it?" And he said, "Did you have any dental work done around the time you got sick?" And as it turned out, I actually did. I actually had 2 of these fillings just randomly removed, and it kind of just sent my bucket overflowing. I was accumulating mercury for many, many years. Oh, by the way, I also wore contact lens fluid or contact lenses. The saline solution in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s contained mercury.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, I didn't know that. They've outlawed that. But unfortunately, if you wore contact lenses during the 70s, 80s, early 90s, you enjoyed what I enjoy, a little mercury right in the brain. So anyways, looking at that, that was my breaking point, is when I had those fillings out. I just never put it together.
So what's causing the cellular damage for the average person today? Let's say they don't have mercury fillings. Maybe, they don't eat too much fish or whatever, or like large fish and things like that that have heavy mercury. But what else is causing the cellular problems?
Yeah. And by the way, this is a great conversation because the levels, even in the last 10 years of things we're exposed to, let's have the discussion, because your listening audience, between 20s to 40s, back when I was a kid, and I'm 58, kids at that age weren't dealing with fatigue, brain fog, hormone problems, anxiety. Today, it's happening. Look, my parents' generation, they never even started getting symptoms until 50s and 60s. Mm-hmm. Today, it's teenagers that are dealing with these things. So what's changed? Well, the type of chemicals that we're getting nailed with. And everybody listening to this should be concerned about this, because at some level, it's going to get you. Look, gut problems. There wasn't a kid growing up that had a gut problem, a food allergy, not one that I can remember, because it was that rare. They weren't on psychotropic drugs for, brain problems, right? I mean, look what has changed. We didn't have kids allergic to the things, peanuts. That didn't happen when I was growing up. The level of toxicity has gone to a whole nother level. Look, if we look at one chemical, glyphosate, okay, this is a pesticide that's sprayed on most of our food.
It's the Roundup.
It's the Roundup. Right. Billions of dollars have been awarded to the damaging effects of these things. You see it on TV.
Oh yeah, they know.
And yet, walk in Home Depot and you'll see good old Roundup across the room. And of course, they change the names of this stuff too. Right. But it's being put out at the same level despite the lawsuits. This chemical opens up your gut barrier, meaning your digestive system, that protects you. And it's creating all of these food intolerances and problems that we're had. It's making them worse. It opens up the blood-brain barrier. In 2012, a senior scientist at MIT, she did one of the first studies showing that it opens up the blood-brain barrier and allows the toxins that we've already been exposed to cross deeper into the brain. And you wonder why we have so much brain fog. Not to mention the fact that right now we have a new problem in the last 10 years. They've put aluminum in jet fuel to make it more efficient, and it's falling down. Acid rain into our water and food. Put aluminum and mercury together, you have a greater lethal dose value. What that means is, in studies, you kill way more rats with far less of both of those neurotoxins than you do higher
when
levels
you combine
of one.
them.
When you combine them, they have a higher death rate. So we're being exposed to levels of aluminum that have been just absolutely crazy. Not to mention the mercury that we got from our parents. By the way, those listening, you have to understand your first mercury exposure. Count the number of silver fillings in mom's mouth. There's a German study called the Drash study that showed that the number of silver fillings in mom's mouth is proportional to how much is in the baby's brain. That's where we got our first exposure. And then we start getting our own exposures. And now the aluminum, and now the glyphosate that allows those to cross deeper in. This is a part of the problem.
So it's, for the average person, they're trying to put food on the table. They're trying to just live, right? Like even myself, who, I feel like I'm a little bit ahead in a lot of those areas.
Yeah.
It's very daunting. It's very, not depressing, but like, it just feels like this thing. It's like, well, what am I going to do about it? It's in everything. It's everywhere. What do I even do to make sure that I am minimized to this exposure, or that I, have the least amount of effect that I possibly can?
Yeah, look, you're right. I mean, we can only minimize these effects, right? And obviously, the process that I teach, I believe everybody needs today, because it helps. It basically upregulates what's being destroyed at the cell. Our cells are meant to get rid of toxins day in, day out. What's happening is, and that's kind of the first conversation we're having, is that these detox pathways that are natural should be happening, and everybody's cells are being overwhelmed by this, absolute disaster.
The cell naturally can detoxify a lot of this.
Right. So the point is if you look at people who are well, they probably have more genetic pathways that are better than others. They probably have been exposed. Their mom may not have had silver fillings, right? They were lucky enough that they didn't grow up in a moldy home. Some do. So it's exposure and it's genetics play a role until, our bucket overflows. right? It's like if this water bottle here, it's very close to the top, right? So if I stress it a little bit, you see water comes out.
Yep.
If your bucket's that full, like, you know, a little bit of stress, you're now developing symptoms if that's indication of the water falling out. So if I drank it down to where there was just this much water in it, I could stress it really hard and you're not going to have symptoms, right?
So the key is not necessarily to eliminate it, but to minimize it enough that it doesn't affect you.
So two things here, right? So let me give a better example. If we had a bathtub upstairs and it was overflowing, causing massive damage down here, you know, people are saying, yeah, those are the symptoms I'm having. We can open up the drain. That's my process, because a lot of people's drains at the cellular level are shut down, and that's a problem. So even the minor amounts of chemicals you're exposed to are making you worse because your cells aren't getting rid of them. Your body's unable to get rid of them. Now, so we want to open up the drain. However, we have to slow down, and this is part of your question. We have to slow down what's going in the tub. Otherwise, even a drain opened up is not going to be able to, you know, control it. So we have to do the best we can to slow down what's going in the tub. Okay, look, I think today it's important to have some type of water filtration system in your home. I think you should never be drinking city water. The levels of chlorine, fluoride, drugs in the water, other contaminants, not good. You're challenging your detox pathways day in, day out. It's what you do day in, day out. Listen, get a shower. I just did a video on my Instagram. I think it has, 250,000 views, and we just did the video. I said, just get a cheap $50, $80 carbon filter for your shower, because you take in 8 glasses of chlorinated water. I was
going to ask us where people get in trouble because they filter their drinking water, right? But their shower, your skin is absorbing so much
8 glasses of chlorinated water in a 10-minute shower, 6-fold on the amount you absorb. Have a whole house system at best. No, that might run you $2,000-3,000. So, but you can get a $50 one for at least your shower. It's a carbon filter to take out the chlorine, because the amount of thyroid conditions, look at the mess I made here. The amount of thyroid conditions that we're seeing today is going through the roof.
And that's about the last thing you want shutting down on you is your thyroid.
Yes, exactly. Because that's how you lose weight, how you have energy.
So so besides, you know, the water, I think most people know nowadays. I mean, growing up, you just drank from the hose, you drank from the spout. It didn't matter. That's what you did. It's like, no, we're in America. We can drink from the faucet. You know, I think most people now know that you really can't drink house water and be okay, tap water. Let me ask you about a couple specific things. What about energy drinks? Like, how bad are those for people? Because I think that's one of the things that you see so many people just are absorbing so much of that. And I don't even know if we know the long-term effects yet because it hasn't been around long enough. But
my camera guy came across the street because we were doing shots outside, and he was sweating, and he disappeared, and he comes back with this nice red energy drink, electrolytes. He's like, look, I got something healthy. He was so proud of himself. And I said, I didn't even look up. I said, did you read the ingredients? He goes, no, but it's electrolytes. That's all it says. And it said that. He was like reading me all the marketing things on the front. I said, let me see it. I took it. Red dye 40. You know, of course, that's where it got its nice red dye. I'm like, oh, by the way, do you know that's outlawed in Europe? You can't use red dye. So this product, it's illegal in Europe. And then I went on to like tell him all the chemicals that were in it. Oh, not to mention the massive amounts of sugar that they're using in these products like Gatorades, and we're not even talking about Red Bull and those things that are loaded with stimulants, caffeine, and dyes and other things. But yeah, these things, we have to stop drinking these things. You know. Oh, by the way, Starbucks, I don't even know the names of these things, like frappes or something.
Nobody does.
Okay, no one knows. Okay, good. I don't go there, so I don't know the names. So I feel like I date myself a bit. But these things are loaded with massive amounts of sugar.
Oh, I've seen like one, they had like it was like a pumpkin spice for Paul or whatever the hell those things are called. And it had like 180 grams of sugar. It's literally like
but the chemical load is, you know, that's the thing is we have to my point earlier, we can't control what's coming down in the atmosphere into our food and water. You know, yes, we need to filter our water, but we have to control what we put in our mouth, right? So let me just give people because there's people going, I can't afford all organic, right? You know, because you're getting a lot of these pesticides that are thyroid disruptors, hormone disruptors. So let's buy, if you go on and Google, you don't need me for this, go on and Google the Clean 15. Clean 15, you'll find. That means all the foods that really don't have very high levels of pesticides and chemicals for multiple reasons. And then the dirty dozen. Avoid the dirty dozen. Google it, you'll find them. If you can't afford organic, at least do that.
Yeah.
You know, filter your water. Here's another big one. Pay a little extra for what you wash your clothes in is very important. Why? Because these detergents have massive hormone disruptors in them, and they're against your skin all day long. And you absorb them like, you know, think about transdermal hormones. Hormone creams are rubbed because they go right into our bloodstream.
Yeah.
That's what that's what happens when you wash your clothes in this. Fabric softeners, beware. Massive. I think last one I did a video on is at 6 endocrine disruptors. Those are hormone disruptors that make people fat. They imitate estrogen. These things are bad. You walk down the street and you go by homes and you smell that smell. They're using fabric softener. You know, Bounce has an odor.
Well, and so I mean, I'm guessing that this information, in one of the reasons I want to bring you on is because I want to just expose my audience to the people that they can then research and really get the in-depth. I mean, we're going to cover a very basic, broad sense of topics today, but I know you have information everywhere on your Instagram and everything that you're doing. I do want to ask about a couple other particular things that are kind of out there right now. You've got these shots that people are taking to lose weight, right? And all this
Ozempic.
Yeah. What's your take on Ozempic and all the other hormonal drugs?
Long-term lose, meaning short-term, sure, you lose weight. The problem with it is that it puts you in a catabolic state. That's why it works, meaning your body starts eating fat, but it starts, it's also eating muscle. So you lose muscle, which I said long-term lose because the more muscle you lose, the lower your metabolism goes.
Right. So every pound of muscle you have, you get 20 more calories, I believe, right? You burn just sitting in a day.
Exactly. So
is it similar to clenbuterol that way, the way that it functions a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. And by the way, ladies out there go, well, I don't, want muscle anyway. You need muscle. You need muscle for normal hormone function. You need muscle to feel good. You need muscle for normal metabolism. So you do, in fact, stay lean and look good, right? So, but it also is destroying cartilage, ligaments, tendons. And again, long-term, you'll feel that consequence. Short-term, maybe not. So people are doing this. It reminds me of what was the craze? It was I almost said GHB.
Talking about it was like a women's
urine. It comes from women's urine.
Pregnant women. Yeah. I know you're talking about.
Not GHB. I'm the dyslexic. I can't get the letters right. Not GHB.
No, I know. That's like a drug.
GHB. Yeah. Anyways, 3 letters.
We both. It's like CHC or something like that.
HCG.
HCG. Thanks.
I know. If I just calm down,
we got there.
Access denied. There it was.
In our defense, there's a lot of letters there in our.
But listen, it worked in the sense that people were able to go down to 500 calorie a day diets. And it allowed you to hold on to your muscle to keep your metabolism up because caloric restriction long-term is another loss. It does not work long-term. Short-term, no problem. But long-term, you start to lose muscle. Your body thinks it's starving and your metabolism goes down, down, down. So caloric restriction does not work long-term. But it allowed you to be caloric restricted and hold on to your muscle. The problem was it was a hormone disaster ready to happen. So a year later, these people ended up in the hormonal tank. Look, if you look at, there's a new pandemic and it's weight loss resistance. People in the age groups that probably are a lot of your viewers, all of a sudden can't lose weight despite diet change. They're going, I'm eating better, I'm exercising, and yet I can't lose weight.
It's a hormone thing or what?
It is. It's a hormone thing. It's a new problem. Again, as I told my own story where I said, man, look, when you look at weight loss and staying lean, it has more to do with hormones than it does even the foods that you eat. When your hormones are active, working in your cell, thyroid hormone, insulin, which is a fat storing hormone, leptin, which is, a hormone that helps you burn fat, tell you to stop eating, ghrelin. I mean, all of these hormones, testosterone, they all play a role in your cell's ability to use fat or not. And when your cells can't hear those hormones, back to hormone resistance, right? Like the thyroid hormone on me, when it can't hear it, now you become less of an efficient fat burner. Your cells can only use two things for energy, sugar or fat. Healthy people, hormonally healthy people at the cellular level, have the ability to use either, go back and forth. So when you're not eating, like at night, your body shifts over to burning fat. Works very well. But many people today, especially the younger generation, because of cellular inflammation, blocking the hormones, causing hormone resistance, they're stuck as sugar burners. Now, I'm going to say it's not your fault. The diet failures, the cravings, giving into the diet, or perfect diet and still not losing weight. Because when you're stuck as a sugar burner with the hormonal inability to use fat for energy, your body will do two things. It'll either give you a craving you can't resist, because it doesn't want to break.
It needs it. It's starving without it, even though you have fat.
Exactly. Right. So what it'll do is it'll either give you a craving or it'll break your muscle down into sugar. It's called gluconeogenesis. The body doesn't want to break your muscle down because it knows it needs it some for survival if it doesn't have to, but oftentimes it has to at night. It'll just break your muscle down, make sugar, because of its inability to burn fat. Or it would rather give you a craving, and most of the time in the daytime, it'll just give you cravings for the carbohydrates. So the question then is, how do we get your cells to become fat burners again? That's everything I teach, because we better start paying attention to the toxins that are driving cellular inflammation, causing the hormone resistance.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So what about testosterone replacement therapy? Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, look, time and a place for any hormone, right? I mean, if your thyroid's non-existent, if your beta cells in your pancreas are non-existent, you better take insulin. But testosterone, it's the same problem. We can increase our blood levels, but that doesn't mean that we're actually getting it more into the cell. And let me give you an example. It's like, well, this is only a good example for people who have kids. If you shout at your kids, meaning take a lot of testosterone, in the beginning it works very well. The kids listen. But eventually, as you shout more at them, they listen less and less. Okay, that's taking testosterone. You're becoming more and more resistant to it, and then you typically need more levels. And here's the other problem. Your body stops or slows down its production of its own testosterone.
Correct.
So that is a long-term game that's very hard to win, because...
I mean, most people just say, I'll just stay on testosterone for the rest of my life. Is there a danger in that?
Yeah, because it can lead to other problems like insulin resistance. It's like, growth hormone can lead to insulin resistance. So the problem is that your body adjusts hormone levels throughout the day. It adjusts these levels as needed, as it sees, as it fits. And you'll need more and more of the testosterone. But the problem is that you also have to break down toxic testosterone, these androgens that can start to build up and drive other problems. So look, you're causing this. Remember I said the hypothalamus sits in the brain and it gets all this feedback of what you need and don't need. You're bypassing a system that is in constant balance with each other, right? All of these hormones play off of each other, and your innate, meaning inborn intelligence, it knows exactly what it needs when.
So if you naturally have, because I run a men's coaching program, so I'm always trying to help the men. One of the biggest issues that I see is men with low test. I mean, it's huge.
I agree,
even our water can lower our test these days. Right. All the food that we eat, all
the hormone disruptors, 100%. Everything we're talking about.
And so, for men, one of the quickest ways to change your energy, to change your mood, to change all those things is to, start taking testosterone. That being said, if there are, obviously everything has a price, and so you might pay it down the line, you might, whatever that might be. But what are some natural ways that men can raise their testosterone if it's low?
Yeah, I mean, look, some of the things, because like Tung Ali, right, aka Long Jack. I mean, some of these things out there that, they work to a degree, but I think to your point, some people are so low that it doesn't maybe push it high enough, right? Look, I think that getting to the real cause, and we started this whole conversation there, why all of a sudden do men, if we're focused on men, but this applies differently to women, right, have testosterone levels that are plummeting? Well, because of the reasons we're talking about earlier. So support your testosterone if you need to, medically, hormonally, or naturally, even better, while you're working upstream to clean up these toxins in your life, because that's the problem. The hormone disruptors that we're exposed to today via water, air, food, everything, right? Silver fillings that we've been exposed to, that poison the pituitary hypothalamus, right? That drives these levels of, a lot of these levels of hormones. Look, you have to get to the cause if you want a lasting, real solution. By putting a Band-Aid on it, and there's a time to do that, right? You have someone who's, to your point, depressed, can't function, can't work. So perhaps supporting the testosterone would be advisable while you're working upstream. And clonopine probably is a safer way to go. It helps the pituitary, produce more, get your testes to produce more testosterone without shutting down your own production. It's a little less confusing to the body. So if someone wanted more of a medical, and I'm not recommending someone take any drug here, right? I'm not in the position to do that. But if somebody wanted a better answer, they may want to talk to their physician about that.
Sure.
And clonopine over just taking straight T. It is definitely an easier game to play. Okay.
One of the things I wanted to ask you, just knowing what your specialty is with, cells and things like that, is doing these multiple day fasts, a 3 or more day fast where the cells start to repair themselves and kill off. Is maybe you could explain, is there how accurate is that, and how beneficial is it to do a 3, 4, 5 day fast?
Well, look, I'm so glad this guy prepared, man, because you know my stuff. It's one way to answer this testosterone problem naturally. And I didn't want to throw fasting out there because I thought that's going to hijack this conversation in a completely different direction. But you kind of nailed it. We want to remove the toxins, clean up our life. That's part of hearing hormones, having normal, natural levels of hormones. Fasting is another amazing biohack to regulate and optimize hormones and bring hormones back to normal levels. I studied fasting in the 1990s when it was not cool, right? It's like years I was walking around telling people fasting is the key, right? Because I witnessed it. I went, studied at fasting clinics, Herbert Shelton's work, mastered it. Fasting, I watched lives transform. And I really didn't have the ear of many people. I was a lone person, not alone, but there's not many of us talking about the benefits of fasting. Now it's in vogue. Okay, let's talk about this. Why does it help regulate and optimize hormones? Why does it help optimize immune system? Because we can get autoimmune to shut down. People that have a lot of food intolerances, that's hyperactive immunity, aka autoimmune to some degree. Thyroid conditions, 80% are autoimmune, meaning your own immune system is attacking the thyroid receptor, driving the cellular inflammation, all of what we've been talking about. Okay, fasting, when you go into a fasted state, and there's different types of fasts, so we need to discuss that.
Yeah, I would love to hear that.
Yeah, there's daily intermittent fasting, what many people are doing. We'll discuss that because there's a right way to do it and a wrong way. There's extended fasting. Let's start with extended fasts, 3-day fast, 5-day fast, 20 days and beyond. Something happens called autophagy, where in that fasted state, your body needs energy to live. And it will break down the bad cells in your body. The innate intelligence, that inborn intelligence, is so smart that it won't just break down good, healthy cells. It identifies the bad ones, the inflamed cells, the hormone-resistant cells. We call these cells senescent cells. They live too long, or aka zombie cells. They cause trouble. They make you age prematurely. They cause hormone disruption. They cause low immunity, hyperimmunity, everything bad that we don't want, these cells cause. So in a fasted state, your body actually uses those. I've been in studies where we can actually look at the levels drop of senescent cells.
You say uses them, it burns them up, using it as energy.
It's called autophagy, meaning it eats them.
Oh, okay.
Burns them up for energy, gets water, gets nutrition,
and it knows
proteins.
To take out the cells, similar to like how a shark cleans up a coral reef. It's like you need the nature, when we don't disrupt it, tends to take care of itself.
Exactly right. So your body does this intuitively. Now here's the best part about it. Not only does it get rid of the bad cell, it stimulates a stem cell that creates a brand new cell.
Oh, wow.
So it was Walter Longo did a study. It was on diabetics. It was the first study's rats. They're duplicating it right now. The results will be coming out in the next few months on humans. but they did a 5-day fast for 4 or 5 months, I can't remember exactly, in a row. And they watched the beta cells in the pancreas regenerate themselves. When they saw it in rats, they were able then, and it, they said it was extraordinary. Like there was enough, there's just 1 or 2 beta cells that are still there. Beta cells are how you produce insulin. And in type 1 diabetics, you don't have enough beta cells, typically from autoimmune where your body destroyed the beta cell to produce enough insulin. So they're watching these rats regain beta cells from this process, get rid of bad cells, stimulate a new stem cell, and the body started creating new beta cells. Wow. Basically a process of breakdown and regenerate, right? So that human study's coming out, but they did a 5-day fast for 4 or 5 months. With each fast, these people got more hormonally healthy with each fast. So we see the same thing, not just with insulin, but we see the same thing with thyroid. We see the same thing with autoimmune. We see the same thing with testosterone. The body can regenerate these tissues that have been beat up from a lot of things, bad living, to say the least, or even our own body creating autoimmune. So fasting tears down and regenerates. Now, also, you reset the microbiome during a fast. Your microbiome, meaning your good and bad, all your bacteria that are in your gut.
Yeah, I did one last May because I had gas for like a month straight. Like it was horrible, and I couldn't get rid of it. And I did a 5-day water fast, and it was gone.
I like 5 days. For years.
Actually, I just lied. I did a 4-day. Now that I think about it, it was 4 days.
Well, here's the thing. Magic happens around day 4 of a fast because this autophagy, and I teach you how you can basically use glucose and ketones. Another story. Sure. I don't want to complicate this, but it's how you use that to find out when you're in max autophagy. Most people enter max autophagy around day 4. So my thing is always carry it out one more day.
Yeah, let it do its thing.
Let it do its thing, 5-day fast. And it's funny because I don't know how many years ago that I met Walter Longo, the gentleman I said did that study, and he also gravitated to 5-day fast. Now, granted, people benefit more from longer fasts sometimes, but you have to remember fasting is a great stress. And if you don't adapt to any stress, it becomes a negative. So many people, we start in partial fasting, and that's what Walter made very popular. A partial fast is when we decrease calories below 1,000, typically, right around 1,000 or below, depending on body size, and then protein has to get under typically 20 grams a day.
Wow.
And the reason for that is because if you do over 20, we find it shuts down autophagy. Okay. So you do still get this autophagy in a partial fast. And most people, I've been teaching doctors these principles for 20 years. Most of the time we start people in a partial fast because it's less of a stress. They'll actually get more autophagy because it's less of a stress. It's more successful for them. So, and then we can lead them into water fasting later. But multiple fasts is really the key because in one 5-day fast, it's not like you're going to get rid of all your senescent cells. It's not like you're going to create enough stem cells to perhaps heal what your body already knows it needs to be healed. But when you monthly put them back to back, and if some people are very thin, we'll fast them every other month. But here's another trick that I learned. The feast is as important as the fast. If you fast for 5 days, pick another 5 days in that month to feast. And what does that mean? That means if you're a low carb person, go high carb. Yeah. If you are eating maybe a lower protein diet for whatever reason, you're more of a plant-based person, go high protein for 5 days, healthy proteins. It can also mean more meals and calories. So 5 days of feasting. Today, I see so many people fasting because they're learning the benefits and they're fasting too much. So now I'm walking around these seminars that I get invited to and I see them, they're gaunt. They're fasting too much. Fasting is a catabolic state, right? It can be good in the short term, but if you're doing too much, people fasting daily, that are eating one meal a day, maybe 2 in a small window, that's fine and good, but you need feast days. And I became popular for teaching people to have 1 or 2 feast days a week where you do.
It's not like a cheat day where you just eat ice cream for breakfast. It's just a day where you eat more calories than
more
you normally
calories,
would, like healthy
more protein,
calories.
or higher carbs.
Yeah.
Any of those can qualify as a feast day, right? Sense. Instead of eating 1 or 2 meals, maybe you eat 4 meals that day.
Got it.
Like Saturdays, I always have a feast day. Matter of fact, I'm entering day 3 of a water fast today. So this has been
right up your alley.
I didn't do that for any other reason. Just
well, I'm glad you said that, because I think one of the problems we have with, a lot of these things that have become popular, and there's a reason they become popular, they work. Right? The water fast, the cold plunge, some of these things, but people take them to the extremes. Yeah. I think cold plunging is another one. Maybe you can talk about like the benefits. I think I have, I see people start doing 15, 20 minutes. I'm like, no, there's no science behind that. You're actually putting yourself in a dangerous situation. Absolutely. And a lot of people, I think, they think that more is better, right? We see this with so many different things, and it's just not. Not
only is more not better, more can be absolutely bad and go the wrong direction. I have a lot of my Instagram videos that have become popular because of that. Too much red light is not necessarily good. Too many cold baths.
I haven't heard the red light one.
So, okay, all these biohacks, I love them all, by the way. I love red light. I love cold plunges. But to your point, there's something called hormesis. That means that a biological system, when stressed, will either get stronger if it adapts. Stronger, healthier, faster, whatever it is. If you adapt, that happens. If you don't adapt, and that's the key, if you don't adapt, then you actually become weaker. Now, we understand this from a workout standpoint.
Sure.
Right? If someone went to the gym, you look like a guy that works out a lot. The average person goes to the gym and does your workout, they're going to get a negative result. They're going to be sore the next day. They'll probably cause damage. They're not used to going at that level. So a good trainer would work them up to maybe not your level, but a higher level, right? Now, the truth is too, is people tend to do the same workouts, and that works in the beginning,
right?
And then it plateaus.
The body adapts.
Yeah, because now it's not a stress anymore.
Right.
So the body, there's no adaptation. The point is that the workout only works because you create a stress. You have to create the stress. And then if you adapt, now how does it adapt? Hormone optimization. Your body cells get more sensitive to testosterone, growth hormone, produces norepinephrine, which leads to a production of more growth hormone. So all these things hormonally take place to adapt from that exercise. If you don't adapt, the exact opposite starts to take place, and you are left in a negative, place. Okay, cold baths. Most people cannot adapt to a 3-minute cold bath. I'm just saying.
It just never gets easier. That's kind of the trick of the cold plunge, is that
it works.
It's always miserable. Like it doesn't. It is. I put one in my back porch, and I was like, "Oh, when does this get easier?" It's like, no, it doesn't.
I don't think psychologically it's always going to be pain, but remember, no, that's how it works. Your body thinks it's going to die, and then it raises norepinephrine. And then that raises growth hormone, and the body starts going into all these protective mechanisms, which, if you adapt to that stress, lead you to a de-inflamed state. Okay, but if you go overboard and don't adapt, you actually become more inflamed the next day. So
that's like if you go too long.
Too long. Now, here's the thing. Then people will ask the question, well, how long then? Yours number's different than mine, different than Mary's, different than Jane's, right? So how do you know? Well, you go in maybe for 10 seconds the first time. See how you feel later that day and how you sleep that night. Evaluate how you feel. You could do a heart rate variability.
Sure.
Some people have Oura rings and those things. And if your heart rate variability trends down after you look at your sleep score, you went too much. And let's say 10 seconds works. Then you can go to try 20, try 30. Your body will tell you. And you may have to stay at 30 seconds for a period of time before you go up, but you can evaluate that by how you feel. The new study came out, and I'm sure you've seen it. 10-second cold showers more often worked better in the study, but I believe it's only because they were just measuring average people. They adapted better to 10 seconds cold than 3 minutes. So their point was the big shock didn't work as good as the less stress. And again, someone who's very used to it, 10 seconds, it's kind of like doing the same workout. It's probably not enough stress for them. They wouldn't get the benefit. They probably need to go longer.
Wow. I love it. Well, it's kind of a fun time to be seeing, there is a lot of biohacking going on. There's a lot of these different things. age longevity is a thing that's kind of picking up some popularity. I've seen just more and more of it coming along. Do you think that there is a point where we will be able to reverse aging? Is that something we can even start to try to work on, or is it all just kind of hyperbole at this point?
Well, look, there's a certain program in our cells to how long humans can live. You know, God's put that in place.
Sure.
There's argument.
We're supposed to die.
Yeah, exactly. There's debate, right? Is it 120? We know people have lived over that, right? Of course, the code could be, you know, a little different. You know, some people think it's 180, right? So I don't know what the code is, but look, there's no doubt about it. We can absolutely do things to really maximize our genetic potential of how long we could live. Unfortunately, this generation is the first generation to not outlive their parents. And,
wow,
and
really?
that is a fact. And unfortunately, I think that has most to do with the toxins that we're being exposed to. Again, the cellular problem. We're also nailing the DNA. You know, these toxins end up building up in the cell. When the cell becomes inflamed, as we're talking about, from mostly toxins, and there's other factors that do that too, dietarily. But then what happens is the cell doesn't get rid of the toxins, right? So now it doesn't get good things in the cell and it doesn't get the bad stuff out. So endogenous, meaning inside the cell, the toxins start building up and then they start tagging the genes. So yes, that will age you prematurely. But to answer your question, I think that biohacks done right can absolutely help this process. No doubt we have to pay attention to toxins. That's what ages us prematurely the most. No doubt the more you spike glucose and insulin, the faster you will age, right? So we have to control our diet.
That's why sugar's so bad, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the more you do that in a day, the faster you will age. There's something else aging people prematurely that we are all getting exposed to. And this is something you can literally change today. Vegetable and canola oil. These are rancid.
French fries?
Yeah, French fries, any fried food. But go in Whole Foods and start reading ingredients. You'll go, oh, vegetable oil. Go down the chip aisle, the crackers, the cereals, vegetable oil, and all non-organic seed oils. These are rancid omega-6 fats that make their way into the membranes. Now, omega-6 fat has gotten a bad rap because, you know, yes, Americans consume too much of it in these forms that I'm discussing, but it's the rancid ones. The fact is they're so important, the omega-6 in the cell membranes, that these rancid omega-6 replace them.
Oh, geez.
And here's the problem. It doesn't last hours. It doesn't last days. It's months.
Wow. And
some believe even longer. So they start accumulating in the membranes, and now they drive that inflammation that we talked about and the hormone resistance.
So I'd kind of like to end it with a couple of rapid fire questions just to get a few more things in before.
We hit a lot.
We
right?
did.
Yeah.
And I appreciate your time because this is so good. Anybody listen to this, if nothing else, it should spark their curiosity to just learn more about all of this, right? I study this stuff. I'm always trying to maximize my own life and health and everything else. Alcohol, why is it so bad for the body? And at what levels do you recommend people definitely not do, I guess?
Yeah, look, alcohol is a potential hormetic stressor. You know, if you adapt, a small amount of alcohol can upregulate glutathione and some positive changes. And we see that, right? Alcohol that, you know, people that drink a little bit of alcohol in, you know, these countries that live very long, but they're not going over over that hormetic curve. It's like the cold bath, right? It's like, you know, just anything else. So a little bit can be fine, but again, everyone is different. Some people, they can't process alcohol at all, and they should probably have zero. Some people can process it much better, and a little bit could actually work good. I watched a lecture from a guy. This was, I don't know how many years ago. I was at a dental conference, and this guy was preaching or teaching on, he was a pure scientist, so preaching was a bad word. You know, he was just teaching on this premise of hormesis, and he showed that mercury, as we know, poisoned me. But he showed that mercury has this positive hormetic effect in the beginning. And this was rat studies. But all these amazing things happen because the body thinks it's, you know, poison, and it upregulates all these amazing cell functions. But he said, now be cautious. That's a small amount of mercury, right? Yeah. There's a sharp hormetic curve because immediately that can turn around and kill the rats. And that's what happens, right? So alcohol has a sharp hormetic curve. It can be partly good, and then it can turn around on someone and it can become very bad very quickly.
Makes sense.
So it is a stress, right? The debate, alcohol bad, caffeine bad. If you adapt, it can be decent.
Well, that was my next question is caffeine.
Yeah. If you adapt, it can be a positive. Okay. But most people are drinking boom, boom, boom so much, their body's not adapting. Yeah. And then the more they do it, the worse the adaptation.
What about diet sodas?
Look, diet soda is an absolute poison in that they use excitotoxins as sweeteners. You could just do the studies yourself and you would, they'll promote studies that show that it was safe, in these amounts, but those studies were driven by the industry. The fact is that, again, in any amount, your body can deal with it, but the amounts of, drinking diet soda after diet soda, I think there was a study just out, it was like 3 a day, and its effect on the brain in pregnant women drinking 3 a day, it raised autism levels like tenfold. I mean, I don't want to misquote it, but it was a high number. I did a video on it. But the point is that people are going over that hormetic curve, just like alcohol, just like caffeine, and now it becomes a nasty for the body.
Got it. Yeah. Dr. Pompa, we could talk all day. I appreciate you. This is so much information. For people that want to learn more, follow you, really get into the weeds and all this stuff, where should we send them?
Look, they can go to pompaprogram.com and watch a free training I did, what I teach my doctors. If that hormone conversation interests you, go that way. Or you can just go to drpompa.com. Generally, Dr. Pompa on Instagram. I'm out there.
Awesome. You've been showing up everywhere and talking to all the major people. It's been fun to watch just in the last couple of months, just all the different interviews you've been giving. You can tell that you've really done your research. And thank you for pouring into my audience, and I look forward to connecting some more.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Jim.
Thank you.